OceanGate shouldn't have been doing what it was doing. I think that's pretty clear. I wish I had been more vocal about that, but I think I was unaware that they weren't certified because I wasn't really studying it. I wasn't really interested. Stockton Rush asked me if I wanted to go out there and dive this season. I wasn't interested. There was a lot of concern about this outfit and this sub. A lot of concern, even to the extent that I wasn't involved in it because I was making Avatar 2 at the time, but a lot of them got together and wrote a letter to OceanGate and said, you have to certify. You cannot take people down. It's irresponsible, and it could lead to catastrophe. Monday morning, when I first found out about the incident, got on a whole bunch of calls and emails. It's a small community. Within an hour and a half, I had the following information. They were on descent. They were at 3,500 feet. They lost comms and tracking. The last one being the critical one, because the transponder that's used to track a sub during descent and on the bottom is a fully autonomous system. It's in its own pressure housing, and it has its own battery power. So for them to lose comms and tracking at the same time, sub was gone. There was no question in my mind. For days, I tried to run other scenarios that could account for it. I could come up with nothing. So the next thing I did was contacted a few more people and managed to track down, there are acoustic networks around. Some are research, some are intelligence. We got confirmation within an hour that there had been a loud bang at the same time that that comms were lost. A loud bang on the hydrophones, loss of transducer or transponder, loss of comms. I knew what happened. Sub imploded. I sent emails to everybody I know. I said, we've lost some friends. The sub has imploded. It's on the bottom in pieces right now. I sent that out Monday morning. I never believed in that technology of wound carbon fiber, wound filament, cylindrical hull. I thought it was a horrible idea. I wish I'd spoken up, but I assumed somebody was smarter than me, because I'd never experimented with that technology, but it just sounded bad on its face because we make pressure hulls out of contiguous material, steel, titanium, ceramic, acrylic. And so you can model it, you can do finite element analysis of it. And, you understand the yield properties, you understand the number of cycles that it can take. But you can't do that with a composite material because it's two dissimilar materials, sort of bonded together. And so we all knew that the danger was delamination and progressive failure over time with microscopic water ingress and fatigue, what they call cycling fatigue. And we knew that if the sub passed its pressure test, it wasn't going to fail on the first dive. It might fail on dive 7, or I don't know what they're at, but it's going to fail over time, which is insidious. You don't get that with steel or with titanium. Now there's one wreck lying next to the other wreck for the same damn reason.
Wow. What a shame. I know a lot of folks have been very, very shocked and traumatized on what happened over the past week or so when it comes to the whole OceanGate Titan submersible tragedy that has taken place over the past couple days while the OceanGate was attempting to dig down into the depths of the ocean, down to the way bottom, to try and explore all the wreckage of the 1915 Titanic that sunk onto sea right in the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, this is another classic case of ego plus hubris equals denial equals arrogance, by one main company, all right? And we call that OceanGate. I'm not going to go too ham on mainly the CEO and the guys that were involved, due to the fact that lives were tragically lost and tragically disintegrated on that day, which we would believe at the time of this recording definitely was around last Sunday, which would be Sunday, June 18th of 2023. Okay, which is literally a sin and a shame. And we are actually going to dig thoroughly deep into why this is the case, as many of us know. They probably have like around the same answer. But I'm actually going to go into like a much more further perspective on how one co-founder and one main CEO of this whole ordeal unfortunately let his arrogance literally get to the best of him. And you are going to see this whole ordeal coming from a dude who has knowledge in civil engineering, okay? Who went to school for civil engineering at the University of Delaware for 4 years. So I can get a good grip on what these professional engineers, professional oceanologists, naval engineers, environmental engineers are mainly saying when it comes to this type of mayhem, when it comes to this type of incident that has literally been unfolded by the whole world literally to see. So we will, ladies and gentlemen, literally get right into it.
Many questions on how a catastrophic implosion takes place, so let's go over that really quickly. And my sincere condolences to the family members of everybody on board. The cabin of a manned submersible is pressurized, very similar to how an airplane is pressurized. The submarine that I worked on, this meter right here measured the pressure, measured atmospheric pressure. So on the surface, before we took a dive, we would see what the surface pressure was. Then throughout the dive, we would keep the submarine at that pressure so that when you came back up, there was technically no difference for you. Okay, so the pressure on the inside of the submarine is significantly less than the pressure on the outside of the submarine. And if there is somehow a hole or a puncture, think high concentration to low concentration, very quickly, it's going to condense that in. I hope that made sense. This would have happened very quickly. They wouldn't even known what was going on. If anybody had known, it would have been the pilot, and it would have been an absolute split second. This is probably the best of the worst situations, but it would have been immediate, and there would have been no pain.
So, ladies and gentlemen, to recap what really went down with the Titan, okay? We knew the CEO of OceanGate, Stockton Rush, who has an aerospace engineering background and whose wife actually has lineage to one of the victims of the Titanic that stems back from 1915, basically disappeared into international waters up in the North Atlantic Ocean, approximately hundreds of miles off of Canada, which actually they descended from St. John's, Newfoundland, in Canada. And they're literally within around 500 miles east of Boston, within that range, if I'm not mistaken. So, around 400 nautical miles where they're in international waters, under the Atlantic Ocean, around the Canadian coast, they had this miniature submersible, right? Basically like the size, like a miniature size of like a can that's actually literally related that you see literally up here. That's basically the can that you mainly deal with when it comes with like a submersible like this. And the cabin is mainly built off of carbon fiber and of titanium. I'm going to discuss that very shortly. Bees be keen with the key words: carbon fiber and titanium. All right. In which the ship descended literally down toward the Titanic, going up towards the Atlantic waters. Once it went down, around 1 hour and 45 minutes into its dive, once it actually went deep underwater, and boom, connection was lost. More so, that's the moment when the submarine has imploded. An explosion mainly deals with like you basically setting off a bomb that has all this debris like flowing outward, Whereas in an implosion has all the debris literally having like an internal bomb going off that fly out inward and compresses, literally wrecking you all the way inside out and actually wrecking the subject and literally the folks that actually went in it. So I have this little plastic bag, for example, right? An implosion where basically has a projection more so of a can literally squeezed up into portions with so much force is literally coming from the sea. For those of you that don't even fully understand about fluid mechanics, there's two types. You got fluid statics and then you got fluid dynamics, right? All the forces that you see literally up in the sea and all the pressure that you see that's going on with the underwater pressure that overwhelms the atmospheric pressure can definitely wreck the submarine and actually crush it all the way through from the inside and suck it all the way up. So much so that death is literally instant. All the bodies would literally be disintegrated and then literally sucked in towards the pressure because all the air is literally sucked right inside and literally shrunken like right within them. So they barely would even feel the implosion. And sadly, you're dealing with like a catastrophic implosion right up in your face. Now, when it comes to fluid mechanics, and I was taught this during engineering school when I was up in Delaware. Fluid mechanics has two main types. You got fluid statics, and then you have fluid dynamics. In the case when it comes to like a body of water that's literally sitting still, that's up in the cup, or you're dealing with like storm water runoff that's like up in like a very small pond, not really anything major, or even a pool or even a small pond that you have up in your house. That will be called fluid statics, where the water is actually mainly still. It hasn't really moved forward as much, unless when you deal with a pool, you have basically like some water actually coming by in order to keep the pool warm. But elsewise, once it shuts off, it becomes static. Now, say you got your jacuzzi running, or if you have your pool running, however it may be, you definitely have some fluid dynamics because you have actually pressure and water moving constantly, going from any little angle that you see of. Especially when it comes to the ocean, where you have like a magnitude of pressure. On the surface, it looks alright. You have like some beautiful waves, just you going on the beach, and you got like surfing going for the tidal drive. But once you actually go deep down into the water, you know, there's a lot of pressure when it comes down to water pressure. It's because, again, water weighs a lot heavier than air, right? When it comes to the human capacity of breathing, lungs, and all that other stuff. And you're dealing with like a bunch of nitrates, carbon dioxides, however it may be, when it actually comes to digging underneath the sea water, where so much pressure placed down on you. And the deeper you go into the water, unfortunately, the more pressure you feel, and the worse it gets. When you actually come close to the full depths, literally like 13,000, 15,000 feet, okay, all hell will literally break loose. The underwater pressure will literally overwhelm you with the atmospheric pressure. You so much so you have so much pressure, literally when the size of the Freedom Towers in New York City coming at you from all angles, literally crushing up your ship, even crushing literally high-tech U.S. Navy submarines by that magnitude. And yes, I'm aware that the Titan has went into the Titanic literally about 20-some times literally over the past 2 years, which I will discuss why it's definitely doomed to fail when it comes to other professional engineers that deals with this whole ordeal, which we will be getting into right now. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in Reddit in the subforum of Ask Engineers, you know, the certified professional engineers that know how to do their work. And as you may know, I do have a background. Like many of y'all know, I have a background in civil engineering. And understand, civil engineering and aerospace engineering are both subsets of mechanical engineering. Remember that, right? The subsets of mechanical engineering, which we will actually dig into why is titanium and carbon fiber not allowed when building submarines. So, based on what we're actually digging into this whole ordeal, yes, titanium has been used on subs before in the history, but based on reading a bunch of professional engineers' files and, opinions, it's the use of carbon fiber and titanium combined, right? And even if you do use them both, right, it's still going to have wear and tear, with carbon fiber being the most vulnerable because due to the fact that that type of material is originally meant to be used when it comes to tension above water, not underwater, in which it can weaken drastically underwater over time. So if we're able to literally dig a little bit deeper into what folks are saying, right? Because you got basically one user who's a professional aerospace engineer. Another is actually involved in the engineering process as well. And yes, we know that Stockton Rush has an aerospace engineering degree. He has an aerospace engineering background. So we see some engineers actually discussing that the carbon fiber will be used for the rest of the material, which will be strong in tension, but not great in compression when you're dealing with underwater, right? So if we scroll further down, right, the use of carbon fiber with the epoxy minutes to apply to an advance, which is kept frozen and slowed down the epoxy cure so it can be stored, and once the carbon fiber doesn't have a shelf life, and what's the matrix and epoxy that does. And they'll use test specimens that will be prepared from the pre-preg as the age of the effect and result in laminate can be evaluated through the testing, and that's how the expiration date is determined. So if we scroll further down when it comes to subs here, so we got one from like a very notable user here by the name of Steam Pig, in which carbon fiber is mainly used for weight, which is great for planes, spaceships, UFO flying objects, helicopters, where weight is a heavy concern when it go above water. It has a lot of great tensile strength, but very, very crappy compressive strengths. Now, if you have a pressure vessel that actually is under external pressure coming from the water, you get compressive stress, which carbon fiber is extremely vulnerable. Now, with titanium, it has a lot of great features, but being under repeat compression is not something that deals with well if used way too often, in which you get fatigue, crack initiation, and crack propagation are where they suffers. Russian subs with titanium hulls were repeatedly re-rated for less depth each time they went to their current max depth, and American subs with high yield steel hulls could repeatedly go to the same test depth over decades with no issues as long as they don't go much deeper than that. And they maintain it every single time that they come back up shore and right at sea level. Now, the last problem according to Steam Pig is joining of dissimilar materials. And once anytime you join the dissimilar materials, it gets a little hairy and nutty. Titanium to carbon fiber is a particularly challenging one due to the different mechanical and chemical properties. Carbon to stainless steel, while still slightly difficult, is much easier because they are pretty close. And now now they're trying to look all this stuff up, and we know that carbon fiber has yet to be approved and certified by the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, because it still would have to do a lot of testing underwater in order for it to be done. Even if it's done by code case receipt permission, with the exceptions, even though it's with like strict materials, doesn't really fully mean that it's allowed by the pressure vessels for human occupancy for any passage that you come by inside in order to go underwater when it comes for external pressure. Coming from an engineer, mind you. Insane.
This Las Vegas billionaire and his son had planned to go on the fatal voyage of the submersible, but pulled out. OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush scoffed at their fears, texting, "It's way safer than flying in a helicopter or even scuba diving." My son's friend researched what could go wrong and put a little scare in him, financier Jay Bloom texted Rush. But Rush dismissed their fears as stupid stuff. How do you feel about that now?
Stockton actually believed what he was saying. His intentions were good. He had a good heart. He was a good man. He believed in he drank his own Kool-Aid.
Seemingly desperate to fill empty seats, Rush offered Bloom and his son a $200,000 discount. Last-minute price is $150,000 per passenger, he wrote, but they passed. Instead, Jay Bloom and his son Sean's places were taken by Pakistani mogul Shahzada Dawood and his son.
I see that father and son that took the seats that we passed on, and but for the grace of God, that could be our picture.
Discovery Channel host Josh Gates took a test drive on the Titan and posted, "I walked away due to my safety concerns." BBC cameras captured the chilling moments on a voyage last year when it was discovered an engine had been, get this, put on backwards.
One of the thrusters is thrusting backwards right now.
Look at that passenger's reaction. The mission went ahead anyway. The most serious structural flaw may have been using carbon fiber and titanium in the pressure hull. Famed director James Cameron, whose film Titanic is the fourth most popular movie of all time, appeared on Good Morning America with Bob Ballard, the explorer who discovered the Titanic wreck.
The Achilles heel of the sub was the composite cylinder that was the main hull that the people were inside. That carbon fiber composite cylinder is now just in very small pieces.
Bob Ballard has known Stockton Rush for 20 years.
His dream was to go down and explore the Titanic, but unfortunately that dream turned into a nightmare.
Debris from the Titan was discovered just 500 yards from the Titanic. The submersible is believed to have sustained a catastrophic implosion less than 2 hours after starting its descent. The 5 passengers apparently did not suffer. Death came to them in a flash, just 30 thousandths of a second. There are apparently no remains to recover. The bodies were disintegrated. And we're learning that the youngest passenger, 19-year-old Suleiman Dawood, was terrified but agreed to go with his dad as a Father's Day gift. His distraught aunt appeared on the Today Show.
To know that my Sully didn't feel a moment's pain, that his brain didn't even realize, that's a relief.
Look, I understand. Stockton's fascination of exploring things on the water and like seeing a bunch of treasures and everything, and looking for all the goodies and, you know, trying to fulfill your dreams come true and all that other stuff. But the main challenge in all of this is literally to be practical when it comes to formulating a plan to actually go do deep sea diving like this, and actually seeking the proper advice and the proper how-tos on how to get this stuff done, right? And actually go literally try and cut corners and do all this other stuff and not do your thorough due diligence. And unfortunately with Mr. Rush here, Mr. Rush the Third here, the lack of due diligence when it comes to analyzing those materials, doing a bunch of experimentary dives with the materials that they had on, basically mechanical failures that they had dealing with the submarine that they built. There's an actual concerns based on OceanGate's history that's regards to the submarine, and one of their former employees, David Lockridge, who was the director of marine operations, not an engineer, but saw some of the stuff that was actually there. He did a report documenting safety concerns that he had about the ship, in which he urged the company to have the time thoroughly assessed and certified by the agency, more specifically the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, ASME. But yet the company declined to do so, claiming that they don't want to pay any extra money and want to try and go for the time being, and actually trying to make maximum profit that way. When it comes to dealing with human life and like the unforgiving nature of the deep blue sea and the blinding sea where it becomes very dark, it could be extremely risky and possibly fatal, and which we have seen that June 18th of 2023. Now, Dave basically says that the transparent viewport on the forward end was only certified to reach a depth of 4,300 feet. Only a third of the depth required to reach the Titanic by design. So if they do like continuous steps going down over and over and over with lack of maintenance, lack of material replacement very often, every single time, you see the wreckage, right? And Lockridge also claimed that OceanGate would not perform non-destructive testing on the vessel's hull before undertaking manned dives. And for those of us don't know what non-destructive testing is, if we're able to actually see what's going on below. Non-destructive testing. Pardon the delay, ladies and gentlemen, here. Let me go pause this. Non-destructive testing is a wide group of analysis techniques that's mainly used in science and technology, more specifically engineering and medicine, to evaluate the properties of a material, specific material that's component or system, without causing any harm, which you use non-destructive examination, non-destructive inspection, and non-destructive evaluation are very commonly used to describe non-destructive testing. Because NDT does not permanently alter the article being inspected, it is extremely valuable that can save both money and time in product evaluation, troubleshooting, and research in the long term, and which the methods are mainly eddy current, magnetic particle, liquid penetrant, radiographic, ultrasonic, and visual testing. So OceanGate failed to do frequent non-destructive testing on their vessel, and actually did their little redevelopment every now and then. And then Dave alleged that he reportedly told that no scan of the hull bond line could be done to check for eliminations. Porosity of voids of sufficient adhesion of the glue being used due to the thickness of the hull. Uh-oh! Dave refused to accept safety proofs from OceanGate's engineering team, and that the company's evaluation of the Titan hull was stronger than any kind of third-party evaluation Dave thought necessary, in which the company sued Lockwood for allegedly breaking his confidentiality contract and making false statements, and Dave countersued, saying he had been wrongfully terminated as a whistleblower for bringing up concerns about Titan's ability to operate safely, in which they both settled months later. Even the Marine Technology Society was concerned. Rob McCon, who is actually a professional deep sea exploration specialist, also concerned, emailed Russ to warn him he was potentially risking his client's safety and advised against the submersible's use for commercial purposes until it had been independently tested and classified, more specifically by the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, right? And he says, I implore you to take every care in your testing and sea trials and to be very, very conservative. And Rush replied that he was tired of industry players who try to use a safety argument to stop innovation. We've heard the baseless cries of you gonna kill someone way too often. I take that as a serious personal insult. Ego get in the way. And McCall then said Rush in an email in which he said, I think you're potentially placing yourself and your clients in a dangerous dynamic. In your race to the Titanic, you're mirroring that famous catastrophic sea is unsinkable. And the OceanGate lawyers try to threaten McCollum with legal action. Uh-oh! David Pogue from CBS Sunday Morning, as he wrote in the Titan to View It last year, noted that the submarine was not equipped with a emergency located beacon during the expedition, and the service support vessel lost track of the Titan for about 5 hours, and such a beacon was definitely necessary, which Mr. Rush failed to do. Now, OceanGate claims that the Titan was designed and engineered by the company in collaboration with experts from NASA, Boeing, and the University of Washington. But it was basically the 1/3 scale model of the Cyclops 2 pressure vessel was built and tested at the University of Washington Applied Physics Laboratory, in which the model was able to sustain a pressure of 4,285 pounds per square inch, corresponding to a depth of approximately 3,000 meters. After the appearance of the Titan in 2023, the University of Washington said that the Applied Physics Laboratory had no involvement of the design, engineering, or testing of the Titan submersible. A spokesperson from Boeing explains that they weren't even a partner on the Titan and did not design or even build it. A spokesperson from NASA said that the NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center has Space Act agreement with OceanGate, but did not conduct testing and manufacturing via its workforce or facilities. And Russ Tower policy with NASA Boeing UW to Pogue in 2022 in response to a question about the perceived gravity, jerry-riggedness, and provisional design based on the use of off-the-shelf components. Now, Russ did his tests, did his own stuff and everything. But once the tests were mainly done, the whole of the time began showing signs of cyclic fatigue, and the craft was derated. And according to Russ, the carbon fiber materials that he bought from Boeing, they got them at a very, very discounted rate because they were past a shelf life. So you mean to tell us that you bought expired material to use during like your submarine trips? Really? All of this that you see here, okay, with all the wrecks that came down that initially actually scientists actually dug for research, that Russ actually want to actually try and take advantage of like a booming industry actually digging into the Titanic before the material starts to expire within 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, right? So they had the initial plans for the tourist seats to be like about over 100 grand. Initially chose because it'd be the price to take for the Vantage suite that's on the Titanic in 1912. That's my mistake. It's sunk in 1912 based on the whole findings in which they adjusted for the inflation. But they should have had it up to $1 million due to the fact that they should have done extensive testing with the submarine hull that they had to make sure that it's still safe to use and certified, by professional engineering companies, right? So they've done all this crazy stuff that's there, and then once the incident that actually came down, all of a sudden, craziness imploded with their CEO passing. The company, for some reason, shut down indefinitely. No phone calls. It's been up in hiding, and there will be litigations against the company, literally probably dealing with lawsuits that's up in the millions of dollars that will be headed their way literally in the years to come due to Stockton's lack of due diligence, due to the company's lack of due diligence and actually thorough advice and thorough research and thorough experimentation with the work that they're actually doing, and actually willing to pay more to make sure that the submarine is actually safe to use when it comes to diving deep on going with deep diving. So this is the unfortunate tragedy that they had to end up enduring, and unfortunately, it's going to be like a lot of backlash that's really will be going down. All right. So what can we learn about this tragedy? This unforeseen tragedy that I wouldn't say it's senseless, but it's unnecessary at this time. Always do thorough due diligence if need be when it comes to dealing with and possibly risking human life, especially when you're dealing with substances and something of that magnitude that hasn't been tested before. You want to try and make sure that that material is literally thoroughly tested for months to years on end before you even try to consider experimenting with yourselves, before you even try to involve passengers that know nothing, don't even know much about the deep sea, don't even know much about civil engineering or aeronautical engineering, aerospace engineering, don't even have like a thorough engineering background, especially when it comes with the seas, especially when it comes with fluid mechanics, especially when it comes to fluid dynamics, on how nutty and how unforgiving the deep blue sea can be given all of its forces underwater, and how powerful it can literally shrink and compress anything that comes in its way. And I would not be surprised if there's international laws. I would not be surprised if there will be like a special UN hearing coming up in Manhattan discussing about this matter when it comes to deep underwater diving. I would not be surprised if director James Cameron comes by and actually gives his take, because he's been a professional diver, not just a director, and he has his own ship that he done built with the assistance of professional engineers and other scientists to help guide him along the way. He's smart because he has a very smart team to literally guide him on what needs to be done prior to them actually making moves and prior to them making professional dives. Russ over here, Stockton Rush, unfortunately did not have a thorough team available and did not take the thorough advice of even the people that actually work for him when it comes to actually getting their stuff certified by professional engineering companies. Didn't do any thorough research on well-experienced mechanical engineers, well-experienced aerospace or even civil engineers to basically discuss about the risks that he's taking whenever he deals with or attempts an expedition like this. It requires a lot of money to blow, and not just $1 million worth of gas to actually be blown apart to try and counter with the price. You gotta be blowing $1 million off of freaking materials to copy off of, stronger materials to copy off of, as well as additional millions of dollars dealing with testing, constant testing of these ships frequently, not just within one-offs and doing it yearly. You may need to take some time to actually try and make sure you do some experimenting with those holes before they're actually safe for people to literally come on. Yeah, this is a very, very sad situation. It's a very, very tragic situation for folks involved, especially with the people and their families that had to endure this unfathomable tragedy. Let's learn from Stockton's mistakes. Let's not get too arrogant on ourselves. There's nothing wrong, because we know that Stockton had a good heart, just like with Sam Bankman-Fried. Like his intents may have went well in the beginning, but when the block got too hot for him, when the challenges got too hot for him, they panicked a bit. They got into now. They sometimes let their own thrill literally cloud their judgment and cloud their thorough analysis when it came with the situation. And unfortunately, in the case of Stockton Rush and the other four people that were involved in his ship, it basically did not have a good ending. Even though it didn't feel that way when they were on there, because they never felt pain, because death was instant just like that. The tragedy is just unfathomable. And my deepest condolences go out to the families of the loved ones that are currently lost. I understand that you need as much time to grieve when ever needed, and we wish you well. We wish you thoroughly well and thorough guidance throughout this very, very difficult time.